This new light we've got on the camera here, it kind of throws me back to a previous lifetime. And I don't mean sort of metaphysically, I want to start a soliloquy or something like that. To be or not to be? That is the question. So maybe instead of a great soliloquy this evening, I just want to talk a little bit about engaging with practice. I was noticing during the walking meditation that we have this great opportunity this evening. It's a kind of a smaller group, but most of the people who are here have practiced before. And so without the distraction or with a greater balance leaning towards experienced practitioners, it gives us an opportunity to engage in practice as the novelty of meditation practice kind of wears off. Our minds are busy all the time. One of the things that we focus on as we engage in our seated meditation practice is just the simple awareness of what we're doing, what our minds are doing as we sit. We're given the instruction when we start just to pay attention to this breathing, to engage in this simple activity of counting our breath. But if we're honest, and if we're actually trying to engage with that, we see that very often we're off doing something other than paying attention to our breath. And so our practice becomes just allowing this awareness to spark up over and over again. Oh, right, I've lost the count. And to draw ourselves back into the unfolding activity of this moment so that we can re-engage with it. Now, it's not exciting or thrilling a lot of the time, I think. Many of us can be very uncomfortable with just being here, with just being present with the physical sensations, the emotional sensations, the intellectual activity that's taking place right here can be uncomfortable. This is why we've developed such wonderful habits and mechanisms to take us away. This is why our imaginations are so vivid. This is why our fears and anxieties are so distracting, because it's uncomfortable, sometimes difficult, to be right here doing what we're doing in the midst of our lives. But all of the activities that we engage in this formal environment, in the Zendo, are aimed at inviting us back home, back to our lives, back to this very moment. Zen teaches that there's nowhere else for us to be. When we look at our lives and how we spend our lives, we spend an incredible amount of time fantasizing about a future. The future that we cannot touch, that we cannot predict. Or we spend a huge amount of time reminiscing about the past in a sentimental way, not even accurately remembering what took place. But if we pay attention to our mind throughout the day, we find that we're constantly going back and forth between what's going to happen and what happened already. We spend a very small amount of our time right here and now. Maybe if there's a sound, we check in. Hey, whoa, what's going on here? Am I okay? Am I in danger? But then the moment that immediate sound, immediate requisite for us to be present dissipates, again already we're off again into the future, off again into the past. I made some corrections during the walking meditation. Keep in step with the person in front of you. Pay attention. The reason is that we experience a direct, consequential outcome when we practice with one another. This practice that we engage in is like a global microcosm. It is an opportunity for us to see the results of what happens when we're not paying attention, when we're off thinking about this and that. We've got, I don't know, maybe 30 bodies here. Each person has a different structure and has a different gait and a different pace. But we have a jikijitsu who leads us in walking meditation, and our practice is to keep in step, keep a sort of close, intimate distance with the person in front of us. And that requires attention, sustained, focused attention. And it's a training tool. It's very difficult for us to just pay attention with our bodies, to be taking in the information that's coming in front of us, to be managing turning corners, and to stay present, keeping in step, especially when it is our habit to be anywhere but here. What we see when we engage in walking meditation is that when we fall out of step, when we gap out for just a second, when we get concerned with ourselves or what we're going to do after this, or wonder what I can eat, or what kind of donut I'm going to get, we look down and we've lost connection with the person in front of us. We've lost awareness of what is in front of us, our very life that sits in front of us, and we've lost it. But not only that, because of that momentary lapse in our concentration, that momentary lapse in connection with the world that we are engaged in, everybody behind us is now also out of step. There is a discontinuity that our lack of concentration has created. Now, in the context of the meditation hall, nobody's going to die if the person at the end of the row is completely out of step with the person at the beginning of the row. The world's not going to end, planes aren't going to crash. But we have to understand that this is a microcosm, this is a lesson, that if we're paying attention, we can learn, we can gain insight into. Each and every moment of our lives is an invitation to engage with the activity of this cosmos that unfolds in front of us every moment. How do we respond to that invitation? When we respond with awareness, when we accept that invitation and embrace the activity of our lives, we find that we can manifest harmoniously with our circumstances. We find that we can manifest harmoniously in relationship. We find that we can manifest harmoniously with our environment. What happens when we ignore that invitation? We find that our own actions can be disconnected, disruptive, and cause disharmony, discord in our relationships, in our work, in our environment. This isn't something that we can sort of get with our heads very well. I can sit here and talk about it, and I think that anybody who has a functioning mind can grasp this concept. But our practice isn't just about thinking about this, understanding it as a conceptual idea, but about knowing what that experience, what that feeling is like. And we do it over and over in this practice, whether we're sitting, whether we're walking, whether we're chanting. We have this opportunity to swing back and forth between discordant, disconnected, unaware, distracted, and present, connected, harmonious. And we find that actually we can apply ourselves. We find that when we allow ourselves to just slip into our regular day-to-day habits, we become more and more distracted. We become more and more immersed, carried off by our thoughts and fears and habits. And when we just simplify, and that's the most significant thing I want to point out. It's not we have to add a whole bunch, we have to do this complex thing in order for us to get back to our lives. This simple activity of connecting with the activity of our breath. There's nothing easier. Just for a moment, letting all of those thoughts about past and future, all of the aspiration, all of the fear, all of the anger, all of the grief, just letting it drop for a moment as we connect with the breath, the activity that's unfolding in this moment. But this practice is not just meant for this meditation hall. We have an opportunity to practice it here in an environment that is set up to enable that, to really make it as easy as possible. There's a whole team of people here setting up the room and timing the periods and making it comfortable and easy for us to practice being engaged with our lives. But where this practice becomes useful is when we begin to engage in this in the midst of our everyday activities, when we're doing our dishes, when we're walking our dogs, when we're driving our cars, when we're doing our paperwork. So I encourage you to take the felt experience that we develop through Zen practice in a formal environment and just bring your awareness to it in your everyday life. Brushing your teeth, cooking your food. Just returning to this simple activity of the breath, allowing our full attention to enter, to embrace, to engage with the unfolding activity of our lives in whatever we're doing. This is the transition between when we are doing Zen practice as a kind of aspect of our life. Like we have our work slice, and we have our exercise slice, and we have our relationship slice, and we have our Zen practice slice. That's one way of practicing, and most of us start that way. But when we start to make this transition, when we start to engage in our work with the idea that there's nowhere else for me to be right now, there's nothing else for me to do than this activity that I'm engaged in, then our work becomes a manifestation of Zen practice. When we're with our children and we say, there's nothing else for me to do right now, there's nowhere else for me to be, and we engage completely, harmoniously with our children, then our parenting slice also becomes a part of our Zen practice. This practice of Buddhism, as I said last week, is just the simple activity of waking up. And though we start in formal practice, we can take every aspect of our life and turn it into an opportunity to wake up.